Well, I do want to welcome everyone. We're super happy today to have Palm Tree here to share with us about some opportunities there and what they're about. Um, if I haven't met you already, I'm Cindy Peck, the Director of Career Strategy here at the Drucker School. And we also have on this call Deborah Nasapak, who's the Associate Director of Career Strategy here, and also Shweta Patel, who's our student graduate assistant that is assisting today and will be helping to answer in the chat as well. But again, super happy to have our team from Palm Tree here. Both Andy and also Charles are here, and they're going to be leading this presentation. And so at this point, I'm going to turn it over to them. Thank you again for coming today.
Great. Thank you, Cindy, very much. And Deborah, Shweta as well. Appreciate you guys having us here today. Look, we've got a nice small group. I actually like this so we can make it somewhat interactive. I'll do a quick introduction of myself and my friend and colleague here, Andy. And the game plan here today is we're going to run through a few things. I want to talk a little bit about, the industry we're in, private equity, M&A, all that stuff. What's it all about? Who are the major players? What's it like to have a career in that space? What's it all about? I'd also like to talk to you guys a little bit about Palm Tree, who we are and how we fit into that space and what we do. And then we can talk to you a little bit about some of the opportunities that we have from a hiring standpoint, specifically our internship program and the training that comes along with that. Quick introduction about myself. My name is Charles Festa. I've been with Palm Tree for about 3 years now. I joined about 3 years ago at this time. I think it was September of 2019. I had a former life. We're not going to get into it on this call. I did have a former life prior to getting into headhunting and private equity and all of that. Certainly ping me offline if you'd like to chat about that. But more applicably, I got started in this world as a headhunter, and I was working specifically with local and regional CPA firms. The big four typically don't need outside headhunting help. They've got a pretty robust internal recruiting team. But I was helping local and regional CPA firms and alternative asset firms, like primarily private equity firms, some REIT firms, helping to place finance and accounting help. And that's how I got hooked up with Palm Tree. This is back in 2019. And after working with them actually, this is back in 2018, after working with them as a headhunter for about a year, the president approached me and said, look, we're looking to scale up. Pick a small firm and turn it into a regional or, national firm one day. And we need some help with the talent acquisition. So would you like to join? And that was my entry into Palm Tree. That was 3 years ago. And since then, we've grown from, and not to my credit at all, but we have grown from about 25 professionals in Southern California to about 100 professionals across 4 offices nationwide. And we are still growing cautiously. We'll talk about that in a little bit. With me today, I have my good friend and senior associate at Palm Tree, Andy Ramirez. I'll flip it over to you, Andy, if you'd like to give yourself a quick introduction.
Yeah. Thank you, Charlie. And thank you, everybody, for having us today. So my name is Andy Ramirez. To get my background, I attended Chapman University, and I also did my BA in economics. So that's good to see that there's a lot of you here that did the same thing. And then I also did my MBA at Chapman as well, with an emphasis in finance and investments. And upon graduating from the undergrad, I worked in aerospace for about 4 years in supply chain finance, but I really wanted to pivot into more investment management, heavy finance. So I used the MBA at Chapman to pivot into Allianz Asset Management and PIMCO, and I worked there for a good number of years. And since then, I've worked for over 15 years across different industries: aerospace, investment management, healthcare, and now M&A consulting. And given that, I've seen a lot of the intricacies of corporate finance, M&A finance, healthcare finance, or, a lot of different spices and cuts and takes of, what you can do within, a financial statement. And from there, when I was approached about Palm Tree, it was actually one of my old classmates from my MBA, Spencer Hong. He's now an SVP here at Palm Tree. And he and I kept in contact ever since the MBA, and using our network together, and what Palm Tree was looking for, what I was looking for next was something in the M&A space that would really challenge me, because I really enjoyed touching a lot of different things. So M&A kind of puts you at that fulcrum, right, where you'll touch so many different companies and so many industries, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. And as of right now at Palm Tree, like I mentioned, I do a lot of heavy FP&A analysis, modeling, looking at cash flow, strategic analysis, and overall, top to bottom, financials. And since then, I've been touching lots of different things, from coffee companies to where I'm at currently at a cargo company at LAX, helping them streamline their financials. And we'll cover specifically what the TNT process looks like after we go through it a little bit here. But yeah, thanks everybody.
Yeah, thanks, Andy. And Andy, you said something kind of interesting there that I was going to bring up a little bit later, but you made the comment about, you kind of learned the power of, what you can do with financial statements and the story they tell. I think that's a pretty important theme to bring up here. Everything that we do, forget about the buzzwords, M&A, private equity, strategic, this, that, or the other. Everything that we do, really at the end of the day, it boils down to financial statements. What are they? What's the story they tell? How can we use that data to make improvements on a company, right? That's essentially at the end of the day a lot of what we're doing. So moving on. The next section of our presentation here, or the first section I should say, we're going to cover what is M&A, what is private equity, what's it all about. Now, this is an interesting conversation because you never know the audience that you're getting. You don't know how immersed, the folks are who are, observing this. So we're going to go through this. I'd like this to be as interactive as possible. So we're going to ask some questions. If you know the answer, blurt it out. If we're, moving at too slow of a pace, feel free to, just kind of poke me and we can pick things up. But the idea is I want to cover M&A and private equity, and then we're going to talk a little bit about how Palm Tree fits into that equation next. So M&A, what's M&A all about? Well, who can give their own definition without reading what's on the screen? Anyone, just blurt it out.
Mergers and acquisitions. Mergers are bringing companies together. Acquisitions, buying companies and, either selling them or bringing them into your existing, company.
Yeah, essentially at the end of the day, it's buying a company, right? A company, just like your iPhone or your computer, whatever it is an asset. It has value. It's got real value. There's a legal pathway and avenue to own it and show exclusivity for it. And essentially mergers and acquisitions refers to the buying and selling of companies, whether they're two companies joining forces or one company buying the other for whatever reason it might be. So, all right, who are the people involved in M&A, right? You got the buyers and you got the sellers, okay? The analogy that I like to bring up right now, and this is going to be a theme throughout this, is real estate. Think of the ultimate asset, if you will, from a personal standpoint. Piece of property. If you don't own a piece of property, when you become a buyer and you have to go through these different avenues to purchase it and work with these different outside vendors. So what kind of buyers are there when it comes to companies? Well, there's financial and strategic. Who is a good example right off the bat, off the top of your head, of a financial purchaser, someone that would be interested in buying a company for financial interest reasons? Anyone?
Like a large PE firm like KKR?
Perfect. Yeah, CJ, that's exactly right. Private equity firms are in the business of buying companies as an asset, just like you and I would be in the business of buying a stock or some other sort of fund, right? So private equity firms will buy companies, make improvements upon them, and then sell them for a profit, just like real estate investing. Sellers, could be any number of different individuals. What we're seeing, the trend that we've been seeing over the last few years, and I'm sorry if I'm dating anyone that can relate to this, but baby boomers, big generation, large in quantity, right? As that population begins to navigate further into their tenure on this planet, they are looking to get out of the businesses that they have created. And with that, they want to make sure that they're compensated for the businesses or empires in their minds, right, that they've created. So oftentimes, if it's not a private equity deal, what we're looking at are, mom and pop shops, successful businesses, let's call it $100-200 million. They're just ready to retire. They want to get out. They don't know what to do. They've spent their entire life building this business, and now they need to sell it. Okay, so that's a good example of just a strategic seller who just wants to get out. Any questions so far about M&A, just high level stuff? Cool. We'll breeze through this. Intermediaries. Okay, who are the players involved in one of these processes? There are lawyers, there's the investment bank, there are advisors, both on the buy side, the sell side. I'm not going to reread this slide. You can see it here, but the point is, I really want to go back to this real estate analogy. When you are a real estate investor, or let's let's actually take the word investment out for a moment. Let's say you as an individual, I'm going to pick on Cindy here. Cindy as an individual just won the lottery. She won, it was a small amount. She won $500,000. A lot of money for most of us, but not a lot of money in the grand scheme of like the Powerball, right? With that $500,000, she decides that she wants to invest it, and rather than going into the traditional avenues of Wall Street, she is going to invest it in a piece of property. So she needs to do a few things. First, she needs to select that piece of property and do her research on that piece of property, make sure that it's a good investment. Then she needs to actually transact on that piece of property. That involves lawyers, maybe not a mortgage because she's paying cash for it. But you have to sign paperwork, and there's a buy side real estate agent, a sell side real estate agent, all these different players involved. And then once she owns that piece of property, she needs to operate it, get renters in there to extract revenue, and make improvements upon it to essentially increase the value of that piece of property. That model is exactly what private equity is doing, but with businesses rather than pieces of property. Does that make sense? Does that resonate with everyone? Nod your head, shake your head, call my bluff if you don't agree. Okay. All right. So with that in mind and using that analogy, the investment bankers are essentially the real estate agents. They're the ones that are representing either the buyer or the seller. They're helping to kind of navigate the very complex process. They're putting together the analysis to see if the investment is worth what the buyers or the sellers think it's worth. And then you have a number of outside advisors who are doing things like quality of earnings analysis, which in layman's terms that's called financial due diligence. It's something that Palm Tree does. And really, that would equate to the inspection part of your real estate model, right? At some point, you need to look at that piece of property and make sure that it's worth what the seller is claiming that it's worth. Is there anything wrong with it? Is there anything that we can't see beneath the surface? That's what quality of earnings and financial due diligence is. That's all pre-deal, right? So anyway, you get the picture here. There's essentially 3 stages to the M&A process. If you want to really summarize it, there's stuff that happens before a deal, there's the transaction itself, and then there's stuff that happens after the deal. And Palm Tree is a firm that will advise at each one of those steps: pre-deal, the transaction itself, and post-deal. And we'll get into that a little bit more in just a moment. Okay, so what is private equity? We kind of already covered this. Here's a nice little slide to kind of summarize things a little bit. But essentially, private equity firms are in the business of buying and selling companies. And like we said with the real estate model, instead of houses, they're doing it with businesses. And they're going through the same process, looking to see where is their opportunity in the marketplace, what industries, what types of companies, what size companies, what geography is a good place to buy an undervalued company. Then they have to actually purchase it. And then they need to make those improvements upon it prior to selling it again for 5-10 times what they paid for it. It's a bit of an exaggeration, but you get the point. So who actually makes money with private equity? Well, private equity firms, the folks that are actually doing the work, they tend to get a cut of this, right? But actually, the actual numbers, when they break down, the private equity firm itself is typically only taking, let's say, about 30% of the profits of one of these transactions, where the people who are supplying the capital, the money, the actual investors, if you will, they're the ones that are going to see the biggest part of this return. And for the way you and I would most commonly know private equity from our humble seats here today, typically you see them in pension funds or other types of internal investment opportunities that would be offered through either your employer or through your financial manager. But these are private again, right? You're not necessarily going to purchase a piece of one of these companies by going into into your app, to go into Wall Street like you would buy a stock or an EFT or even a cryptocurrency, right? This has to be done through the firm that is essentially closing the transaction to an elite group of investors who've been pre-qualified and have proven to have the capital to do this. We're not going to go too deep into the ins and outs of how private equity works, because that's another 2-hour lecture. But let me pause here. Do you guys have any questions thus far? All good? Cool. Moving forward. Okay. General kind of understanding of how private equity works. These investment horizons, says 3 to 7 years. I like to say even closer, like 2 to 10, sometimes even longer. Here you go. Profits are typically split about 80% to the investors, the people who are actually supplying the capital to buy the company. 20% typically goes back to the private equity firm. Those are the folks that are actually doing the operations and going through the motions. And I think we covered most of this to move on. All right. So M&A, private equity. We have a general idea of what it's all about. Who's Palm Tree? What do we do? Are we a private equity firm? Are we an investment bank? Are we a consulting firm? We're a little bit of all of that. We're not a private equity firm in that we're not actually deploying our own capital to purchase these assets, but we are working with the private equity firms who do. So the best way I can describe Palm Tree, the way it stands today, and it has evolved significantly over the course of the last 12 years, but we are a true hybrid of both an investment bank and a consultancy. And we specialize, the work that we do is all laser focused on M&A. And for the most part, I'd say about 90% of the deals that we're working on are actually with private equity firms. Yeah, Julian, go ahead. I see you have a question.
So are you guys like brokers in terms of like facilitating exchanges and all that, or?
Yes, in some regards, the investment bank is the broker. We have a broker dealer license, so we are registered with FINRA, and the investment bank can represent either the buy side or the sell side as the actual investment team that's executing the deal. But we also have consulting services to help on either side of that as well. And we'll unpack that in just a second. But good question, Julian. Anything else while we have your attention here? Cool. All right. So who comprises the team at Palm Tree? Again, I mentioned that we're a very small firm a number of years back. We've been around since 2010, grown slowly for the first 10 years and gone through several kind of iterations of business platform, and it's kind of naturally grown into what it's become today. It was in 2019 that we started getting serious about the scale-up process. Again, that's when I joined, and that's when we started laying down the foundation to actually open the investment banking branch of the business as well. We received that licensing from FINRA to become a full-fledged broker-dealer in October of 2020. Essentially what happened, I joined, a few others joined to help, stand up this investment bank. Late 2019, we all remember what happened in early 2020. Things changed a lot. The world shut down. M&A activity actually completely halted. Private equity firms were not deploying new capital for the first half of 2020. They were essentially in triage mode, making sure that the portfolio companies that they already owned didn't go under, because that's a worst case scenario. You spend $100, $200 million on a company, pandemic hits, and the company goes away. That's just money gone, right? You have nothing to show for it. So thankfully, Palm Tree got through with no layoffs, no furloughs. We kept the lights on, helping our businesses, our clients, support those businesses, making sure that they kept their lights on. So what could have been a very precarious year ended up actually being a very successful year, and we opened up the investment bank. So with that, who do we have at Palm Tree now? It's a pretty good mix of M&A professionals, some folks coming directly from private equity firms. We have a number of folks from Platinum Equity in LA. Platinum Equity, actually our firm's president and co-founder is from Platinum, and the managing director who oversees the investment bank, he's a former Platinum guy as well. Platinum Equity actually remains to this day one of our biggest clients. We have a very strong relationship with those folks. Investment bankers from everything from big bulge bracket banks like Jefferies or JP Morgan, down to the middle market banks like Houlihan Lokey. Most recently, we hired an investment banker from Moelis, direct competitors with Intrepid and Lincoln and some of those folks as well. A lot of big four accountants. In fact, the junior tier, the analysts that we hire that don't go through the internship, if they don't have M&A experience already, we're typically hiring big four auditors, at the associate or senior associate level. We found that platform tends to give junior tier exposure to client services, which is important, and also really lay down the framework for US GAAP, which is very important. Folks from consulting firms like the McKinseys and the BCGs out there, and then also from business operations. Someone like Andy, for example, who's with us today, is coming directly from an operations setting. All right, transactions, transitions, transformations. Let's talk a little bit about the services. So this is all great in theory, you know, M&A, private equity, deal. What do we at Palm Tree actually do? Remembering now again that there are three primary sections to that M&A life cycle: pre-deal, all the stuff, all the research that you need to do before you buy something, the transaction itself, and then post-deal, all the stuff that you need to do to improve that asset. So this is what we have going on. Andy, do you want to, why don't you take this slide? And if you want me to dig deeper into the financial due diligence, I can, but I'll let you kind of cover the work that you've been doing and kind of run through the pre-deal and post-deal work.
Perfect. Yeah. Thanks for the handoff. Yeah. So what I'll talk about is TNT and a lot of my involvement with it. I've been with Palm Tree for it'll be about a year, coming up in a month. And in that time, I've hit about 5 or 6 different engagements, of which, though, the one I'm on right now, it's been a gamut of the entire process that Palm Tree works through on TNT. But yeah, as Charlie mentioned, TNT is about entering the company post-transaction and diving really deep into their operations, strategy, overall financial management, and statements to really understand and better understand and improve that position of that company. And as I mentioned, the example that I'll give today is what we call the project flight integration. And what that was is the acquirer, WFS. They're a global leader of cargo handling operations at all major airports across the globe. You're thinking like LAX, Miami, JFK, and some in Europe. What they did is they acquired a handful of companies back Q4 2021. And of those, one of them was the one I'm working on right now, Mercury Air Cargo. And they have operations at LAX, San Francisco, and San Jose, all of which, had different systems, different managers, different financial statement roll-ups, different P&Ls, all, very fragmented. So what Palm Tree came in to do was, during the transaction, we squared away the transaction. I personally didn't see that part of the deal, but when I joined the program on January 22, I immediately jumped in. Post-transaction was finalized. And from there, all the diligence had been performed, all the financial statements were verified and audited. And then from there, the team that I created with Palm Tree, another management called Chris Wallen, who just got promoted recently, if you check LinkedIn. He and I created a team over here at LAX. And what we did is we worked with the WFS controller, CFO, VP of finance, in addition to the Mercury CFO, controller and other finance personnel, to really integrate the systems. We looked at their financial statements, and the very top level goal in transitioning the company was to transform their close process from about a 14-day close cycle to 4 days, which is what the acquiring company, that's their norm. So, looking at that, that's a huge improvement in time constraints and, getting everything to the acquiring company much quicker. So within a month of coming onto the project, we were successfully able to do that by, looking at root cause analysis, seeing what we could do to accelerate the processes, what could we do quicker, faster, better, starting day one. So yeah, we were successful in, transitioning that process internally at Mercury. And then another thing that we did too was to look at their systems. That was the next big ask of us, was to get all those fragmented systems I mentioned earlier onto one system, which is what WFS uses, at their HQ. So we actually we had to leapfrog different systems. So the personnel in San Francisco and San Jose, they were on one financial system, QuickBooks. We got them off of that onto the system they use at LAX. Once we consolidated all of that, we got them off that system and into SAP. So now everything post-transaction, during the transition now is all in one financial system. All the financial statements, all the tonnage, because it's a cargo company, all the personnel, all the salary, everything is now in one system versus, the 4 or 5 that were here as of about 6 months ago. And yeah, so that's what we did from day one. I'm currently on site at the cargo company right now, speaking to, to what we've done, and, hopefully we can share with you guys what we do in the future. Yeah, thanks, Charlie.
Yeah, good stuff. I mean, that's a good example of, if you were able to follow along there, these are kind of the very fast moving initiatives that private equity firms, task us or charge us with, accomplishing, fairly tight timelines, but it's by virtue of, their investment and what needs to happen, right? So Andy's working primarily in what I like to call the post-close side of the business, or what we call our T&T, or transitions and transformations practice. broadly speaking, it's all the work that needs to get done after one of our clients buys a portfolio company, but before they sell it, the hold period, if you will. So, they buy this company, they close on it, they're now the owners. Day one, they need to come in and operate it. They immediately see all these inefficiencies. Andy's talking about, shortening a close period. You got to remember, these inefficiencies end up having repercussions on revenue. And the ultimate goal at the end of this is to increase revenue, increase EBITDA, increase the value of the company for a profit, right? This is a game of money. Yeah. So just kind of looking at this from a very high level standpoint, 30,000 feet. Again, pre-deal work that we do is mostly what we call financial due diligence and quality of earnings work. That's done mostly by folks with an accounting background, mostly folks from if you've heard of transaction advisory services, all the big four have a department that does something called quality of earnings analysis or financial due diligence. That's essentially what we're doing. And we're forensically going into the books of the organization to look to see what the health of those numbers are. How accurate are they? Are there any one-time non-recurring fees? I mean, the typical example that I would give, especially in a privately held family-owned business, is maybe the owner's husband or the owner's wife is channeling the lease of their car through the business's books. I mean, that's kind of a lame example because it's not that impactful, but things like that, or legal expenses. Let's say there was one lawsuit and it turned out to be nothing, but there were still legal bills. Those aren't recurring costs, and it shouldn't be charged against the value of the business if you're a seller, because it was a one-time thing that shouldn't be happening again. So that's what the financial due diligence group is doing. That's what the pre-deal group is doing. They're looking at the value of this company before our client buys it through other valuation methods as well, not just financial due diligence. Andy's group, the T&T group, they're the ones that are making the improvements to those portfolio companies after they've been purchased in order to basically see the investment thesis come into fruition. So everything that needs to get done to increase the value of that company. And then the third piece of this would be the investment bank itself. And those are the folks, as you guys know, who are actually brokering the deal on either end, either buy side or sell side. So moving on, just a couple quick, can you guys still see my screen here? Yeah, okay, good. Just making sure. Bragging rights here, just like to flash up a little, this is just a fraction of some of the clients that we work with. Shore Capital is a new one that we can add to that list. We're pretty proud of that one. We have been, hoping to get on board and work with Shore for quite some time, but you'll see some other big names up there: Carlisle, Oaktree, Platinum, as we mentioned, Gray Cliff. These are just a small handful of the private equity firms that we work with. These numbers are a bit dated. If you look in the lower left-hand part of the screen there, you'll see May 2021. So these numbers are deflated quite a bit to where they stand today. But for a small firm, we've got some pretty good successes under our belt here. All right, let's talk about the fun stuff. Let me pause. Any questions about M&A, private equity, Palm Tree before we go into careers, internships, or anything like that? All good?
I got a quick question.
Yeah, sure.
Do you, I guess, like, to advance high in the private equity field, do you need a CPA, or would you recommend getting a CPA?
That's a fantastic question, Julian. Traditional, excuse me, I just hit my mic. I want to let Angel back in as well. Traditional pathways into private equity can be tricky. A lot of it is just pure luck and who you know. Private equity is possibly the hardest thing to break into directly. I think the most traditional path that you would see in terms of, if you don't have, let's say you don't have any connections. In your case, you have a dad in private equity. You probably have some folks in your network that you should leverage, because that's how you're going to get into it. If you don't have any connection like that, typically the path would be, I would say, accounting degree, go into Big Four, do audit for a year, and then essentially from there, make your way over to investment banking somehow. And that typically is an MBA route. We don't require an MBA at Palm Tree. We're a little bit different. We'll talk about that in a moment. From there, once you're in investment banking and you have some M&A experience, or if you're on the corporate side in a corporate development position, you have that M&A experience, that's usually the place that you're going to get recruited from to get directly into private equity. But even that can be a little bit of a crapshoot. Quite frankly, when people leave Palmtree, we have a very low attrition rate, very low turnover rate. When people leave Palmtree, they usually go to one of two places. Either they become VP of finance or CFO at a portfolio company, because now they've gotten that operations experience, they have the finance experience, they have the accounting experience, they understand M&A, they understand operations, they understand EBITDA and margins and how to increase the value. Or they're essentially getting poached by one of our clients, a private equity firm that says, hey, sorry to do this, but we want to grab Andy, for example. We wouldn't want to let Andy go, but at the same time, if it's what Andy wanted, we'd say, yes, you can have him. We'll see you on the other side of the table next deal. So that's great. It's a good question, though. I mean, there are arguments about, do you need a CPA? Do you need an MBA? It really depends on the firm, their policies. Generally speaking, I think a CPA is a very good thing for all finance professionals to have. It shows that you understand the basics and that you need to know about US GAAP, debits and credits, which sometimes if you skip the accounting route and you only get the finance experience, there can be blind spots. I'm not saying that across the board, so I hope I'm not insulting anyone, but as a recruiter that has spent at least the last 7 or 8 years in finance and accounting, I would say even when we're hiring someone that is financial, like a financial modeler or a CFO or someone on the finance side, having that CPA as a backbone is very beneficial. Not required though. But good question, Julian. I can talk for hours about career progression and whatnot in this field. If you guys want to ping me offline, we can have these. Even if you're not interested in Palmtree, you just want to know like recruiting stuff, I'm happy to help any of you and all of you. Just find me on LinkedIn and we'll take care of that. Other questions?
I was gonna say, Charlie, the whole like once a palm tree, always a palm tree. Yeah, mention that based on your note you just brought up.
Yeah, palm trees. I like to say palm trees a little bit like I was gonna say like the Ivy Leagues. Actually, I'm gonna make it one step better than that. It's like the little Ivy Leagues, like the Carleton colleges of the world, the Connecticut colleges, Amherst. Impossible to get into, but once you're in, you're in. We invest in you, and if you do leave, you're part of our alumni network. And, we've actually had some folks, good example, Andy, I don't know if this is what you were referring to, but we had one of our vice presidents, very valued member of the team, loved him to death. He got poached by one of our clients to become a CFO for one of the portfolio companies and didn't want to see him go, but we're like, this is a once in a lifetime opportunity. You got to do it. So we sent him off and we said, look, if the whole thing blows up and falls apart, come back. We'll take you back. So if that's what you're referring to, Andy, once a palm tree, always a palm tree. Yeah. Good stuff. Other questions before we move on to careers here? Cool. Just keep an eye on time, 12:41. All right. Just like to flash this up, I'm not going to run through all of our core values, but the reason why I'm showing this and the reason why it's taking up an entire page and has so many words on it is this is important to us. It's more important to us than the skill set, quite frankly. Palmtree was founded on the principle that the founders loved what they did in M&A. They loved what they were doing in private equity, but the industry itself tends to foster a very difficult environment to work in sometimes. I'm trying to be very diplomatic with word choice here. It's a very cutthroat industry, to say it bluntly. And what they wanted to do is continue working in this space, but put together an environment that really fostered growth. And instead of having it be cutthroat competitive, have it be more collegiate, have it be more cooperative. So they put together this firm that was going to be an M&A and private equity advisory firm. And they really wanted the core values to be centered around the culture, around growth, around career progression, around inclusion. So here are our core values, freshly revamped just this past year. We spent a full year creating them. The point that I'm trying to make here, though, is the culture at Palmtree is phenomenal. We have some of the smartest, brightest M&A professionals that you'll ever meet on board, but they all have a very similar glue, and that is, at the end of the day, they're the kind of people you want to hang out with. And I think that's very important. Work should be something that you do, not necessarily a place you go. So we are very, very flexible in terms of our hybrid environment. The people that you work with at work, you end up spending more time with than your own family, so you should like them as much. And that's what we've created here at Palm Tree. It's a group of very, very smart pedigree individuals, very, very down to earth, and quite frankly, it's worth noting that we are a meritocracy as well, which is somewhat unheard of in this industry. And what I mean by that is your ability to get promoted and move up the ranks rests solely on your own shoulders. You are not competing with your colleagues. You're not being, waiting for another year or two to go by because there's some sort of policy about 2 years before you're up for promotion. You have the requirements that you need to hit in front of you laid out in bullet points. Once you're able to accomplish those duties, those responsibilities, those tasks, and you're ready for the next step, we will promote you. So there's a lot of career progression at Palm Tree, not to mention the fact that, again, never like to advertise this as a stepping stone, but if your ultimate goal is to get into private equity or become a CFO, it's a pretty good stepping stone as well. Some more stuff to exceed at Palm Tree. I'm not going to run through this right now, but everything you'd expect: detail, time management. In the words of Dave Walensky, my boss, my friend, one of my favorite people on this planet, this job is quote unquote freaking hard. So you got to figure out how to put up boundaries, guardrails. You're expected to work 8 to 10 hours a day. You're not expected to work 24 hours a day, and no one's going to tell you when you need to work. You have meetings on the calendar that you should attend if you're required to be there, and if not, then you need to use your own judgment as whether or not you should be there. And otherwise, we're not babysitting. Again, the firm tends to foster motivated individuals who know how to manage their own time. And once you get into the ecosystem, again, it does actually provide a lot of flexibility because you can live a life and work kind of simultaneously, and you can put up the guardrails where you need to. Another point, going back to the very beginning here when Andy was talking about financial statements, Excel too. Everything we do is in Excel. So Excel skills are a must at Palm Tree. And we can talk a little bit about that if you have specific questions. Last point I want to bring up, I'll spend just a couple minutes on this and then we'll flip it over to entirely questions. The internship program. I'm often asked, do you hire folks directly without the internship program? The answer is yes, but above the associate level, you essentially need to be coming from a direct competitor, with a subject matter expertise in one of these 3 service lines, whether it's financial due diligence, transitions and transformations, consulting work like what Andy's doing, or investment banking. If you're in the process of making a pivot from another industry, including, finance, corporate finance or something along those lines, really the best way to do it is go through the internship. And the reason for it is our internship is essentially a 12-week boot camp. Think along the lines of like a, breaking into Wall Street or Wall Street Oasis or one of those, Wall Street boot camps. We have something very similar that we administer live. It's proprietary. It's gathering all best practices from private equity, investment banking, corporate development, corporate FP&A, Big Four accounting. So there's a lot to learn there. The first 3 weeks of the internship essentially is a classroom experience. You're just learning. And then the next 2 weeks after that is taking all that knowledge and putting it to the test. We essentially run you through an entire simulated M&A deal from start to finish, culminating with you pitching the deal to the board of directors at Palm Tree, who's serving as a mock private equity firm. Then from there, we start to ramp you up on more and more client work. So you're working on client stuff the whole time, but it kind of progressively ramps up because we spend the first 3 weeks training you. Then we actually put that to the test with the case competition, which is a lot of fun and a lot of work. And then you're essentially free to just work after that. And quite frankly, that is how we do the majority of our hiring at the analyst, senior analyst, and sometimes even associate level. So if Palm Tree is something that, if it sounds like it interests you, then I certainly recommend applying for the internship program. It starts in mid-June. I'm going to drop into the chat box here as well the link if you'd like to apply. We're accepting applications now, rolling interviews right through until typically like mid-January. We like to have everything buttoned up. And then the program itself runs from mid-June right through until essentially you need to be back at school. It's predominantly remote because we have students from all over the country, but we do have some in-person events in Southern California to make sure that people actually spend some time together. And if you're in Southern California already, you're welcome to leverage our office in West LA. We just got a new office in Brentwood. Yep. So any questions here about the internship? Actually, let's just turn it over and say, I think that I'll just double check. I think that was my last slide. Yeah, it looks like it. So I can stop sharing. Any questions at all, guys? Any questions about Palm Tree, about the industry, about recruiting? You tell me anything at all.
Yeah, so just to be clear, so typically you do most of your hiring through the internship program. That's correct?
Yeah, anybody that doesn't have a background in this already, we like to go through the internship program because it most importantly, it serves as a training ground that we're not big enough where we can just run, 12-week trainings year round. We're still, again, we're growing, we're at 100 people, but we're still small. So that's the biggest piece of it. And that will also give us the opportunity to see how quickly you'll learn, which you're not going to necessarily see in our regular internship process. For a senior analyst or an associate who is already in financial due diligence, for example, in other words, they're at KPMG, they're in transaction advisory, they're running quality of earnings analyses, 2 of those a month, that's what they're doing. They're FDD professionals. Yeah, we certainly hire those folks. But for individuals who are looking to make a pivot from corporate finance or from corporate accounting or from whatever industry that they were in, operations, you really do need to go through the internship because it's the only place where you're going to get that hand holding and really robust training in order to set you up for success. We do, however, for individuals that, let's say, graduate in May of 2023, and they're like, I really want to be at Palm Tree, but I don't have the experience, so I can't apply for a full-time job. You can still do the internship with the understanding that as long as you perform and you knock it out of the park, you'll receive an offer, for in August at the end of the internship for immediately afterwards. So in other words, you wouldn't need to wait a full year to join the other class or anything like that. We'll put you to work whenever you're ready to start working. And we have, I'd say, in any given summer, almost a third of our candidates have already graduated and they're just looking to break into Palm Tree and looking for an immediate full-time offer afterwards. Good question, though.
What would you say is the success rate of your internship program?
I'd say it's harder to get in. Once you're in, we're going to train you. And we'll know within a week whether or not you're going to make it. If you make it to the end of it, then you can make it through Palm Tree for sure. Generally speaking, Nate, it's competitive. We get a lot of applicants. Where are we now? We're in 2022. In 2021, we had 6 interns because we only really had relationships with USC, UCLA, MBA programs, and Chapman. This year, we've expanded that. We have relationships with you fine folks, as well as the undergraduate group at Claremont McKenna. In fact, we had 2 individuals on campus on Friday for that. And then 30 or 40 other universities around the country, including, some of the Big Ten out east, down, southeast, some of the Ivies. So with that, this past summer, we actually had an internship class of 30 individuals, both undergraduate and master's and MBA, Masters of Finance as well. And I think we extended return offers to, I want to say every bit of 20 of them, maybe even 25. It's usually more of a, do you want to be here or you want to look at other options, or, are you a freshman, you still have 4 years to go, that sort of thing. But yeah, we'll invest in you if you want to invest in us.
Yeah, I had a good example of that. I have a mentee at Chapman who's now an analyst at Palm Tree. He applied and interviewed on his own about a year ago. He applied directly to Palm Tree for a specific position, and Charlie, kind of sat him down and said, hey, you don't have this experience just yet, but, go get that experience and then come back to us. And then he and I met because of the mentor program at Chapman. And I mentioned again, hey, you've mentioned you're interested in M&A. Would you like to try to get into Palm Tree? And we sat down and we said, okay, the internship program would be perfect for you. And he did the internship program, and now he actually signed on and got accepted.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, Andy, I forgot about that. Sam Kelly, yeah, he perfect example of that. He had been in the workforce, he was graduating and he did the internship with us this summer, did very well, and now he's a full-time employee, so he didn't have to wait too long. So, that is an avenue, and I'm obviously each one of these situations is going to be very unique for the individual. So, ping me, we can talk about this stuff. I do have office hours where I can set up 15-minute calls, and I do respond very actively on LinkedIn, and I'll drop my email address in here as well. So other questions? Anything at all?
Yeah, I mean, I have a less specific question, but how much quantitative analysis are you doing? Is it like big macro trends that you're looking at? I mean, you said you do most of the stuff in Excel. I assume it's very tailored LBO modeling, but are you doing any like, big credit risk models or kind of macro stuff?
We're not necessarily doing macro stuff, because you got to remember who's hiring us and why they're hiring us. We're usually being hired by a private equity firm to analyze a company.
Sure.
So we're not necessarily looking at like industry trends. We're not doing like market research.
Okay.
We have done commercial due diligence, that sort of thing. The investment bank will certainly do that as they're looking at the landscape of either a buy or a sell side mandate. But the majority of the data analysis, the modeling that we do is more and actually, I forgot, I have an individual to my left here that does this day in and day out. Andy, what's your response to that question? Not to put you on the spot.
no worries. I would say, yeah, specifically to what Charlie mentioned, the clients that I've been on specifically within the year that I've been here are very, it's very micro based. I have my background in econ. So yeah, when you say macro, like that's really what I wanted to work at, like the IRS or the Fed, looking at more global macro stuff. But yeah, I would say at Palm Tree specifically, and in this type of consulting, because you're focused on a company, you're looking at their statements. Now you may have some ad hoc analysis, which I am doing on the side, still at the same project, where I am looking at macro trends within their specific, niche industry, right? So for example, I'm at a cargo company. I'm looking at competitors at other stations or airports and seeing how are they doing, right? So you kind of zoom out after you zoom in very, very tightly on the company itself. But I would say, yeah, Palm Tree specifically, we're doing more micro-based analysis.
Yeah, that's a good point, Andy. I think we're usually tasked to zoom in before we zoom out. That's the best way to summarize it, because you got to remember the investment is one tiny little portfolio company that's doing $120 million in revenue a year. It's no impact on the global economy, but that's where they're going to make their money, and they're paying our bills, right? So how is this thing functioning, and what tells us how it's functioning? You model stuff out, right? And you brought up an interesting fact about, we're doing a lot of LBO analysis. We are, yes and no. But I would say what would you say the most, what would you think the most requested financial model is, Andy? Probably a 13-week cash flow, right?
Yeah. So I was going to say I didn't get to it in my little thing because I haven't done too much of it here at WFS. But prior, I was doing a coffee company, a stock company, this company that makes like bingo sheets and scratchers for like little parties, right? I did a company for that, and each one of those, the number one request was cash and treasury, right? So in order to look at your cash, what we do is we provide a 13 all the way up to like a 20-week cash forecast, because a lot of times we'll jump into the company and they're managing cash, but they're raising their hand and saying, hey, I need a better way to do this. I need it to be streamlined. I need it to be standardized across my sites and my personnel. So that's where, that's usually the number one request that we work with, is that cash flow, because again, cash is king. And if you don't have it, you're not going to be operating much longer. So yeah, the big thing again with a 13-week cash, you're looking at AR, AP, ad hoc expenses, CapEx, and again, looking at how the P&L is being impacted, your balance sheet, reconciling accounts, and yeah. So a little bit going back to that note about the CPA, like me, I am not an accountant by trade, by training, by education. However, I have enough to be dangerous with accounting, right? I know what needs to be done. But when it comes to like specific tax or treasury items, I may have to lean on someone else, such as my project lead over here, who is an accredited CPA and tax professional at Palm Tree. As Charlie mentioned, we have a lot of professional accountants here. But yeah, you're going to be touching the bread and butter of a company, which is its accountancy, its treasury, and its financial statements.
Yeah. And actually, CJ, I want to take this opportunity too, because I know we're running short on time, but it's really important to mention this. Our junior tier, the folks who are doing the work, like a big chunk of the work, the analysts, the senior analysts, associates, both with the internship and full-time, they actually join as generalists. And what I mean by that, they're getting exposure to all the service lines: pre-deal, financial due diligence and valuations; post-deal, transitions and transformations. What does that actually mean? Finance, budgeting, forecasting, and a lot of financial modeling. And then, of course, the investment banking piece as well. And we're not going to have time to go into the ins and outs of this, but both the internship and the full-time analysts and associates have a bit of a rotation. And the reason why we do that is it makes you a very, very dangerous finance and accounting professional on the backside of it, specifically an M&A professional, because now you understand what's going on before the work gets to you. You understand where the work is going after you're done with it. You understand the process as a whole. As you move up the ranks at Palmtree, when you get to senior associate, VP, that's when you start to focus, what am I when I grow up? Am I a financial due diligence professional and transformations professional, or am I an investment banker? You have time to kind of figure that out, and you have a mentor assigned to you. They'll help navigate that career path as you go up the ranks, make sure that you have all the resources and support that you need. And again, we can unpack all of this, but it should be noted that the internship, and again, the junior tier, you start as a generalist, and then you start to work towards where you ultimately want to be. We have a minute left. I'm sure most of you need to jump. I will need to jump in a few minutes here, but I'm happy to answer any lingering questions. And Andy, if you need to jump, you can leave at any point as well.
Yeah. So yeah, I would say thank you everybody, and thank you Charlie and Cindy for hosting us. And hopefully, if any questions, reach out on LinkedIn. I'm always open to talk and help you guys through.
Thanks
again, everybody.
for joining us, Andy.
Yeah, thanks again for joining us, and for sure, just for your time and all of that knowledge. So much to learn today. Students, if you want to reach out, feel free to connect with me, and I can give you the links that we do after.